Ross our town manager?
He hasn't started yet,
Okay.
unless he just hasn't flipped the switch on. So, welcome everybody. I'm Jody Ross, the Westford Town Manager, and we're here to talk about stormwater today. And before we start, I'm just going to make a few introductions so you kind of know who's talking to you. So Paul Starrett is our town engineer, and Mark Cost is our chairman of the Board of Selectmen. Christine Collins is our treasurer collector. Steve Cronin is our water superintendent. And then we have Emily Sherbo, who works for Ty and Bond, who's been helping us. She's the project manager, assisting us in this process. Jeremy Downs is our assistant town engineer. Larry Pinero is our water business agent. And then over here we have Kate Barrett, who is our public relations outreach person. So that's kind of who's here to help today. And I think what we'd like to do is start off with kind of a brief presentation that Christine Collins will lead, and then we'll move into some more information that Emily will share, and then we're just going to open it up to questions, and there's lots more material we can share, but we'll at least start with that to kind of give you a broad understanding of what we're talking about. So with that, Christine, why don't you start?
Okay, so first question is, why are we talking about stormwater? The town of Westford maintains a stormwater permit with the DEP. The town has been complying with stormwater regulations within our own budget since 2003. This is nothing new. Stormwater regulations are not new, and stormwater permits are not new. So we've been covering those costs now under the budget. But with our aging infrastructure and new EPA regulations, the 5-year permit that was issued on July 1st, 2018 has raised the bar considerably for stormwater for Westford. Our obligation under the new permit for compliance is much greater than our last permit. The town of Westford completed a stormwater management master plan in 2016, and I believe that's the volumes of it over there. So it's quite a lot of information. The stormwater management master plan evaluated Westford's current stormwater management practices and identified future needs for a sustainable stormwater program. It presented a pragmatic, cost-effective approach to addressing drainage infrastructure needs while considering local, state, and federal water quality initiatives to protect our valuable water resources, not just for now, but for future generations. The purposes stated in the Stormwater Master Plan document were to comply with more stringent federal and state environmental regulations, to preserve and improve water quality in Westford, to maintain and make improvements to our drainage and stormwater treatment systems, and to identify a sustainable funding strategy that's adequate and equitable. So we got a lot of information out of the master plan, and our planning will be based upon those findings. The finance team has made a recommendation that an enterprise fund be established to account for stormwater activity. If the Board of Selectmen accepts the recommendation of the finance team, an article to establish the enterprise will be presented to town meeting. So why is the finance team recommending an enterprise fund? It's so that collection of revenues would be applied directly to the designated purpose and cannot be spent on anything else. Fees can be kept in the fund and accumulate for future projects, capital projects. It improves transparency of tracking actual revenues and expenditures for this purpose. And the state recommends an enterprise fund for stormwater management. So what will it cost? One of the biggest pieces of information that we were able to get out of all the work that was put into the master plan were estimated needs, and we have also assigned costs to those needs for a period of years to come. The costs have been estimated at $1.6 million per year for the next several years. So that's $1.6 million each year. Currently, we have budgeted within the town's budget about $600,000 across several departments that provides for our stormwater needs. So we have a funding shortfall of about $1 million per year. The additional $1 million that we're hoping to raise would be used for compliance, a number of capital improvements, operation and maintenance, and administration of our stormwater program. Okay? There's only a couple of ways that we can raise this money. We can do it under the tax base by absorbing the additional $1 million in existing budgets, which would result in significant service reductions, or our only other option under the tax base would be overrides. The second option for raising the money would be a new stormwater utility fee, which is what you may have been hearing about in a large part of why we're all here. Under the stormwater utility fee, all properties would be charged a fee based on a calculation that starts with impervious surface, uses an equivalent residential unit, and then applies that unit to 3 tiers under the residential side, and then a calculation on the commercial side that starts with that ERU, or equivalent residential unit. To further describe the fee structure, I'm turning it over to Emily so she can go through some of the tables and examples
Pause there and
with
ask
you.
for questions now, Jody, wait till the end, or?
Does anybody have a question right now? Yes, Tom?
You didn't mention how many years, Christine. Can you be more specific?
The 1.6 million per year would be to the end of this permit. The permit ends in 5 years, so it started July 1st, 2018, and it would end at the end of 5 years, 23, I believe.
But the costs are probably only going up from there. I mean, it
Right.
doesn't mean we're in compliance and then it goes away. It's just that keeps us in compliance, and then we get a new permit and see what more we need to do.
So that would bring us to parity under the 5 years,
Bring us what?
well, parity, as you said, compliance.
That's right, but
Based on current
Yeah,
regulations.
well, it's gonna change, I understand.
That's right.
Right.
Okay, 5 years.
Excuse me,
sir.
one question
Yes.
also. On the previous slide, you had mentioned the cost is 1.6 million, but the actual cost is 2.2, because we're presently picking up 600,000 of that.
No, the total cost for compliance right now is estimated at $1.6 million every year. Of the 1.6, 600 is already budgeted.
So that's
We need to
included,
raise
all
an
right.
additional 1 million.
All right.
Good questions, thank you. All right, we'll keep going.
Okay. So for that new stormwater utility fee, I'm gonna explain a little bit of how we think that that will work for Westford, at this point. So Christine mentioned an equivalent residential unit. So what that is we look at all the single-family residential properties in Westford, and that's about the average impervious surface on your average size parcel. So a fee would be established on an ERU basis. So the ERU is really the key where we scale that up or down to establish fees. So in Westford, when we looked at all the impervious cover, the equivalent residential unit was 3,500 square feet of impervious cover. And those impervious surfaces have already been calculated for most properties, so that made that analysis fairly easy for us. And for people who don't know what an impervious surface even is, it's a hard surface where the rain really cannot penetrate, and that includes buildings, rooftops, driveways, parking lots, etc. And while the ERU is still under consideration, and we're going through this rate structure and rate model, what we've been looking at is a tiered single-family residential rate, because there's a big distribution of different types of single-family homes in Westford, and we want to be as fair as possible. So if you look at, I have to use a pointer, between these lines, you have your ERU in the middle there that captures about 50% of the parcels, of the single-family residential parcels in Westford. And then 25% below this line would be charged less than 1 ERU, so 0.6 ERUs. And then up here, this top 25% of single-family residential parcels would be charged 1.5 ERU. And these are what we've calculated for estimated fees. So for that first tier, that lower tier to the far left, we're looking at $45 a year for 0.6 ERUs. That's anybody less than 2,800 square feet of impervious cover. Tier 2 in the middle, so between 2,800 square feet and 4,350 square feet is 1 ERU at $75 per year. And then Tier 3 is $113 per year for 1.5 ERUs, and that's anything above 4,350 square feet.
Can I ask a question about the bar chart there?
Sure, I can go back.
Is that something that's known for each residential property now?
Yes, this
Yes.
actually, these blue lines all represent the homes in Westford. And you can see that right about here at 3,500 that's the number, that's the average, that's the peak of the bell curve. It shows all of the homes, that are smaller and all of the homes that are larger. You can see there's a decreasing amount. So that is all gathered from our GIS, our Geographic Information System, to tell us.
Well, then I have this question, that if that's already known, why simplify it into 3 bands? Why not just have each one go according to the particular value for that property?
That is an
It saves us a
excellent
lot of
question.
problems
Oh, I
with,
see.
those people that say, I took my shed down, so I want a $6 time, carry the one, every time a bill goes out. So this creates a nice cushion for
Yes.
those people that are smaller homes, the average home in Westford, and larger. And then we'll be talking about commercial next.
Thank you.
So I just want to mention, and then we'll get her question. This decision has not been made yet by the Board of Selectmen. They have heard what's going on, several meetings, but they have not made a decision, but this is what we are recommending. If it goes fee-based, if it goes taxation, the amount that we need gets spread to everybody, and you know, if it's not an override, as we said, that would mean we'd have to find $1 million in our budget to cut, which obviously could have devastating effects, but hasn't been decided yet, so yes.
Are things like impervious patios and pools included in the calculation?
I think because the calculations are in, you know, there's some refinement to be done on the impervious cover. Right now, I don't think pools are in, patios are, we have some walkways.
Okay. And how frequently is the information in the GIS system updated? In terms of when?
Annually in terms of new development, and then, of course, if we anticipate once the enterprise fund is established and we have capital, one of the capital investments we would want to make is to do what's called a LiDAR flyover, which would give us highly precise measurements of impervious surfaces. We're using the information we have available to us today.
Yeah, and I'll add, the reason you use the ERU is because it gives you that 3,500 unit, right? So it's very expensive to have your GIS extremely accurate to the square foot level, so that's why you're sort of grouped into those buckets.
Okay, I was thinking, you know, for example, the number of times that homes have additions put on and stuff like that.
Now, let me also say that if it's by taxation that the selectmen decide to do this, you may file an abatement if you don't agree with your assessment, or if it's fee-based, there can be other incentives or credits or things like that. So it doesn't mean you get that bill once and that's it, and you have no recourse. We're expecting that in the beginning, there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of, you know,
Okay, I was more
Okay.
thinking about it's accurate to begin with, and what's the process in place that keeps it accurate?
Right.
Just a question, so how often would you recommend that the flyovers occur?
We haven't had a LiDAR flyover in this town before, so we would probably want to do one of those initially. We capture all, through our planning board process, we capture all the new plans by as-built, and they
we
can be
do
incorporated.
flyovers
And we
fairly
do-
frequently.
Right.
And
We just
that's
add
something
LiDAR to
do. Yeah,
the recipe of what they're looking
Okay.
at.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, so
Okay.
we'll move along.
So keep going. All right, so the other half of the fee structure, we talked about residential, but for non-residential and really non-single family residential, we would scale up this fee based on the charge per ERU. So right now, the estimated fee is $75 per ERU. And I'm gonna go through a few examples, and we also have these same examples on boards down here, if you wanna look at them closer after this. So for residential, here's 3 examples where we have a larger property with 1.5 ERUs worth of impervious cover versus 1 ERU versus 0.6 ERUs, and you can see the range in fees, just as we discussed. So commercial, it gets a little bit more complicated, but over here we have Primrose Park. This is about 99 ERUs, and that would generate a fee of $7,425. So up here, if you can't read this, there's Littleton, Technology Park on Littleton Road. That's just under $4,000 for 53 ERUs, etc. So you can see you're just strictly multiplying $75 times the number of ERUs. Another point to make is that under a fee scenario, the town would also be charged, potentially be charged a fee for town properties, including schools. So these are some examples of schools where we've got Stony Brook Middle School. There's 109 ERUs. That's a little over $8,000. These community fields is another good example where the fields are actually considered permeable, whereas the parking area and the walkways are impervious. So it's less impervious area. So with the fee structure, you would also charge a fee to any nonprofits. And these are 2 churches in town where you can see this would generate a fee for 33 ERUs for St. Catherine, and then you've got 12 ERUs for St. Mark's Episcopal.
Yes?
So, therefore, your property that doesn't have any buildings or any parking lots doesn't have any fee, is that correct? Conservation land, for instance.
Right,
Yeah, it
right.
should have no fee.
But you would if you do have one building or one paved parking lot or something like that, you would then be kicked into the minimum, the 45.
Thank you.
And we went through, so we're going through these rough examples, and if after the presentations, I can show you specific properties if anybody's curious.
Yes, Tom?
I guess I'm trying to figure out what we're trying to solve here. You're gonna take the property, subtract what you believe the impervious surface are, and how does that relate to the amount of water that goes someplace else?
It's not really that interrelated. It's really that the town as a whole has to comply with EPA regulations. And so we are trying to figure out the most fair way for the town as a whole to take care of that. Because if you could think about our roads and how they're all over town, and we all use those roads, and commercial uses them and so on, the drains, the bodies of water, all that is our total town. So it's not necessarily your house or your business and what you're doing to impact. It's how do we handle this as an entire town?
The impervious surfaces are just a rational nexus
That's
to
right.
make the connection, because even if your property is entirely compliant with all the regulations, the 10 standards from Mass DEP, you're still having an impact on our aquifer and our watershed. You don't capture all of your suspended solids, only some of them. You don't do thermal pollution, you don't do anything at all for thermal pollution, all those things that have an impact.
Annette?
I was just curious, is this a fairly unique model, or do other towns use something similar?
Address that. So stormwater utilities are very common across the country, and there are more and more of them being implemented in Massachusetts with the increased stormwater regulations. And this, what we've presented as the fee methodology, is fairly consistent. Everyone does it a little tiny bit differently, but it's usually based on an ERU in the impervious cover.
Yes, sir.
Quick question. The goal of this entire project is to remove pollutants from our aquifer. I just want to make sure that we go up high enough not to forget that. We're looking at a lot of different things right now, but that's the ultimate goal, is to remove pollutants from getting into our aquifer, and consequently for Westford, that's our drinking water. Am I right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, good.
Thank you for summarizing that. We should put that on our,
And
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
not because we've had discussions of this nature before in the committee that goes in it. It isn't just because some people want to and some people don't. It's just part of the regulations, right? So that's exactly the goal, but it's the EPA is mandating that it happen.
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna turn it back over to Christine to explain what's coming next.
Okay, so we have quite a few decisions to make in the near future and down the road a couple of years. The first decision, as we mentioned before, is the March town meeting, whether or not there will be a stormwater utility enterprise fund adopted. That is just adopting the fund for the enterprise to live in. It does not provide a budget. It does not give permission to raise the fee. The fee, if it happens, is based on a Board of Selectmen decision. So that will happen further down the road on our list. As far as compliance goes, the permit began in July of 2018, and that was the beginning of our fiscal year we're in right now, fiscal year 2019. And the work for the permit in the first year has been underway, and that was previously appropriated because Paul could see this coming. In FY 2020, funding for permit year 2 is going to be part of the capital appropriation. And again, Paul asked that the capital plan provide for that for the second year. By the summer of 2019, the selectmen will need to decide whether we are moving in the direction of a fee or taxation. In the new fiscal year, next fiscal year 2020, based on that decision, there will be final details to hammer out the rates, the rate structure, the billing or not billing, administration, whether we're going to be doing utility bills or seeking an override. So all of those things, this is why the timing of the enterprise fund is important to this town meeting, because in order to know what direction we're going in, that enterprise fund is key. In 2021, the proposed enterprise fund would be in effect, and whether if we go ahead with taxation, the taxation would begin in that year. And if with the utility bills, the first ones would become due in that fiscal year. If we go in the direction of taxation and we propose an override and it fails, 2021 would be the first year where the budgets would be impacted. Okay.
So does anybody have any questions about this timeline? Okay. You know, I think the selectmen have not heard about the enterprise, well, they've heard, but they have not discussed the enterprise fund article yet, because we thought town meeting had to create the utility fee or taxation, and we learned that in fact that's a selectman decision. And the enterprise fund is a simple, not simple, but it's an accounting mechanism. We have one in ambulance, those of you who are familiar. We have one in recreation, we have one in water. So it keeps all the money together, the revenues we collect and the expenses that go out. And even if the town subsidizes those with taxation, it's still just all kept in one pot, so we know exactly what it cost. Yes, sir.
What is actually decided at the town meeting? I just wanted, is it the enterprise fund, or is it deciding whether or not we go with a utility?
It is to create, we're asking if the selectmen concur next Tuesday night to create an enterprise fund. That's it. There's no money involved. It's really just creating that fund, that funding mechanism. Then over the summer, as we put here, we tried to be a little vague because it's up to the selectmen when, but we really need them to decide, and these are all public meetings, people can attend, should they go taxation or should they go fee-based? But again, as Christine said, just to make it very clear, this year we've had a lot of discussions about the budget and that we can't fund what the schools are looking for. So for us to have to come up with $1 million more out of our existing town budgets is really impossible unless we're laying off police officers, firefighters, school teachers, so on. But the selectmen have that decision to make. If they decide to go to taxation, it may be that they are seeking an override because we can't fund it within our current budget, or if they decide to go fee, this is what we are proposing to them. But they do have decisions to make. Like, this is basically at compliance levels. We could go lower, we could go a little higher, we'll talk to them about that, but this is what we're recommending. And this includes, you know, the finance director, Christine, the, you know, tax collector treasurer, me, and Steve, who's in the water department, because they would probably be doing the billing if we decide to go that route. So very complex, and but
it is just the enterprise fund in March.
Yeah, just the enterprise fund, nothing else. Just setting it aside.
It's just an accounting mechanism.
Right, that's right.
And then town meeting will subsequently be able to approve the budget as they do the water and
That's right.
ambulance.
That's right.
So that would still be a town meeting decision.
To be clear, this is an unfunded mandate, $1 million.
That's exactly right.
Actually, the 1.6 million is an
That's right.
unfunded mandate. We're just
Right.
funding it internally.
It is an unfunded mandate. That is correct, but there is a good purpose for that unfunded mandate, we just
Add
have
it to the list.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, sir.
We have two major highways running through Westford, 495 and Route 3. And question is, do we have any possibility of grants from the federal government or state? Because those two highways generate a tremendous amount of runoff with pollution in them.
I think that's an excellent question. I don't know the answer to that.
They are not a part of what's called an MS4, the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. We're responsible for the MS4 in Westford. They have their own permit in their own jurisdiction. In fact, last 2 summers behind the scenes, you didn't even know this, they were beefing up all of their stormwater management up and down 495 in Westford. They did that over the last 2 summers.
But one thing I might mention is that whenever there is a grant available, we apply for it. And we actually just put in a grant for $75,000.
Application.
I'm sorry, grant application, thank you, for $75,000 related to the computerization we would need to go to kind of a new billing system. So there are funds available here and there that we will always apply for. If, yes?
Going down a level from the federal to the state, is Westford responsible for the stormwater management on state roads like 110?
No, they have their own permits for maintaining the MS4, their stormwater systems on their roads. They clean it, they maintain it. For the roadway infrastructure, it's largely having to sweep the roads a certain number of times depending on which area you're in. If you're near an impaired waterway, you gotta do it more. You have to clean out the catch basins. Mass DOT does that on 110 now, and they're also responsible for their own outfall testing as well.
But they're not going to give us any
Right.
funding for their
No, and
ERUs.
we have since, now the first permit has been in effect since 2003. We've been able to bury that in our budget, all the things that we were supposed to do in the first permit years. It's just, they have now overwhelmed us with the things that we have to do with mapping and testing, et cetera. But we have asked since 2003 that Mass DEP pay for this program that they've imposed on us. But it would be in the $500 million range for them to finance all of the stormwater systems around the state. And then that's not gonna do that.
And I would just say, we don't bury it in the budget. We
Right.
have allocated funding in
Right.
the budget for this purpose, so.
Yeah.
It's all very clear, very transparent,
Needs
so.
to be buried.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just move on, if we can.
I don't know what books you're using, Jody. I have.
We're down to questions and answers, and there are presentations that, exhibits that,
Yeah, I
Emily's
can
gonna
explain, or do you want to
Sure,
explain
no,
the
just to
exhibits?
help, because there's, the key part of this is the financial. We know that that's what you are most interested in. But those of you who do have an interest in the reasons behind all this, we have a station over here. Jeremy, you'll be can answer your questions about our existing infrastructure. I have the master plan itself here, the 4-volume, over 500 pages of research that we did to get to the place where we can say the words we're saying today. And then Emily has a station set up where she can talk to you about your individual properties if you have questions.
So do we have a link to the individual properties online?
I do.
That they can access? I don't mean today, but I mean
Oh.
that they can go back and access? Because I think it might be helpful if we do provide that link, and then people can go in and take a look at what the impact is on their own.
We can probably make it public.
Okay, so that would be great if we could do that, if you
Make
could
it
let me know, but that way, you know, we could send out to the stakeholders here and maybe all the Westford businesses how they can access this, so they know exactly, without the selectmen making their decisions yet, but
Right.
what you might be looking at.
We
But I
also
think
do-
before we-
do some FAQs.
We have a
that we
lot
can
of
help.
extra information for those of you who wanna really delve into this, but I felt it was really important that you hear the financials, because this is going to be the impact on your businesses and our residents. And so that's really where I wanted to start off, and then those of you that are very interested in the deeper levels, we're here with lots of materials. So are there any other questions about, yes?
So my taxes are around $5,000 a year. I'm gonna pay $5,045 because my house is small.
If the
In total?
selectmen decide to go with a fee structure that we recommend, then you would pay your taxes, whatever that is, and the fee. That's correct.
A separate.
And I do
That
have
would
a
save
question
my
actually
cost.
for you
And
that
my
just
cost.
popped in my head. I mean, you're right, it is a new fee, or new taxes, or reduced services, you know, so. But I do have a question for those here. So we've been meeting about how to do this because it's a lot of work and, you know, there's a lot involved, a lot of moving pieces, but how often do people want, let's just say it's a fee base, because if it's taxes, that's different, but how often would you wanna have a bill? Would you want one a year with maybe 2 dates you have to pay by, or 1 bill, 3 bill, 4 bill, not 3, but, you know, I mean, what are your thoughts on
One or
that?
4 would probably be.
One or what?
One or
One or
4.
four.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that does
Either
cost
annually
money
or-
too, for us to put out those bills, which gets tagged on to the, so does anybody have any strong feelings about that?
So for the average house, you're talking between $50 and $100?
Yes,
I would say once a year.
okay. How about for the businesses? That this could be a $7,000 bill. I mean, is there anybody here from a large business that has an opinion about that?
I would say quarterly or semi-annually.
Okay,
Quarterly or semi-annually.
so can we bill businesses differently than residents?
That's a good question.
Okay, so we need to find that out, because obviously we don't wanna split a $45 bill into 4 bills. And
What-
we'd like to streamline, you know, our town's about 15% commercial versus residents on the tax bills, but,
I wonder if we were able to send out a bill that had the total and then 4 dates that you could pay the 4 quarterly amounts, would that be confusing? Or would that be,
no, but for,
you know,
for, you know, the
those who
gentleman in
wanna
the back,
pay it?
if we wanted to just send one bill, but we gave you 4 deadlines, would that be,
We could do that.
yeah? Because we really, the work and the postage and all that involved with 4 bills is significant.
You want to take and reduce the administrative cost as
That's
much as
right.
possible.
That's right.
right?
Streamline it. Okay. Any other questions about kind of the financial? Yes?
Consider excluding like schools and nonprofits?
No, that is a selectman decision, but at this point, if it was taxation, then they would not be, you know, part of that. But if it's fee, then they would. And,
So remember that whoever we give relief to is pushing the burden on to the rest of the residents. So it would not be, we wouldn't be talking about $45 and $75 anymore. We'd be talking about a lot more because of these other properties. The schools and the churches, tend to be big.
so I don't know exactly how that fee works with the town, if that's, we haven't figured that out, but I believe it's about $90,000 that the town has as this 1 million new money. But it's something the selectmen have to discuss. Yes?
Going back to the administrative, if the board of selectmen decide to have a fee, I know it's another expense, but we already do a mailing for excise tax. Would it make sense? Is there any way to tie in a bill for the stormwater at the same time that the excise tax bills get mailed out?
Unfortunately, tax bills are heavily regulated, and it is not permissible to add another fee to any other kind of tax bill. At least not yet. We're thinking eventually the state may change that, but right now it is
Now,
not
let me just
possible.
say, and then I'll get you, but, that, you know, we already bill water. Those of you who are on town water get a water bill. So we're looking at software that we could create a separate type situation, cause, you know, this would be 100%, not 70. But, so we're looking at that right now. We think the initial push is going to be significant, but then after that, you know, it may be additional hours, but we're not talking lots of new employees or anything like that. But it's a lot of work, so, yes, ma'am.
Well, I was just thinking is if there's an annual water fund bill, could it go in with one of the biannual tax statements? Or the real estate, the property tax bills, because it's actually money that's owed corresponding to the property that you own.
Yeah, the state has, or town council and the state have let us know that it is not permissible to include
Put them
them.
in the same folder?
No,
The same envelope?
no, it is not okay.
It's unfortunate, you can only
Yeah.
put flyers about recycling and things like that,
Yeah.
so.
They tell you all these
Informational.
things that you have to do, but then they never make it easy for you to do
Yeah,
it.
informational only, and even the information is very limited, what we can put in a tax bill.
Yes, sir.
Would the expectation be that the fee raised would cover the entire 1.6 or just the additional 1 million?
So, the selectmen have not made that decision, but my recommendation is it's just the incremental increase, because we've already budgeted for this 600,000. So why pass that along in a new taxation or a new fee? We'll keep that where it is, and this will just be on top of that. But they haven't, again, they haven't made their decision, but that's our recommendation. Any other questions about the finance part? So if any of you, we've got lots of things you can walk around and learn about, and we'll figure out whether we can put your parcel online. But if you have a parcel and you want to know right now what the estimated cost is, Emily will be happy to look that up for you. But feel free to mosey around and talk to some of the people.
Sorry, can I ask a
Yeah,
question?
sure.
Just out of curiosity, how many of you that are here are actual business owners in town?
Pateras, Hanover.
You can be confident, it's a good business, is it? So 3 or 4? Okay.
So most of you are residents, just interested in this? Yeah, okay.
Can I ask them
Sure.
a question? Of the people in this room, when we started to say stormwater, 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 did you have an understanding of what that meant?
No.
I didn't.
Okay.
So
So I do need to do
that's why we
description.
really are trying to pull this back and understand, this is finance. This is money we're talking about that we're going to be asking people for, so that's the key. If you have any suggestions on the presentation we made today, please feel free to email me or Christine or Paul, because we'd like to dial that down, that we're trying to use this as a catalyst for the town meeting presentation.
So something on stormwater.
Yeah, it would be really helpful.
Me
I mean,
too.
it's much clearer now, yeah.
But
I
you
guess,
should start with
I
that.
came in thinking it was about our water, like, I mean, obviously it's all our water, but it's public water versus well water versus, so, if I'm a well owner, do I have to pay this? I kinda came in wondering about that, so.
Okay, so we will make it a little clearer at the beginning. I think we've been talking about stormwater and for 45 minutes and then we get into the money and everybody's glazed over. So we thought we should talk about the money first, but maybe we should flesh out the one, what it is we're talking about.
no pun
Okay,
intended.
yeah. How about any more suggestions? Yes?
I think your biggest hurdle is going to be explaining to people that although there's a nexus between general stormwater systems for the town and people's impervious surface,
Right.
there's really none, right? People are gonna say, why am I paying this fee to address stormwater if my property isn't contributing to the problem? And I know you tried to explain that, what I'm saying, that's gonna be, I think a lot of people are gonna have that question.
One of the
Okay,
best
especially businesses. I may have 8,000 units, but I also have a state-of-the-art, on-site stormwater management system that the town, through its regulations, required me to build as part of my business. And now I'm being asked to pay for the maintenance and continued, operation of the big system. I think it's the correct way to do it. I know you've got to choose some unit of measurement and go with it, but I just think people will have that question about, explain to me again how much pavement I have on my driveway has to do with how much I should be pitching in for the system. Again, I'm not questioning the process, I think it's the correct one, but as a citizen, I think that's where they're gonna have the hard time. What am I paying for and why? And why is what I paid tied into my driveway?
I think, Doug, and it's a great question, and we anticipate the question, and we've been asking the EPA the same question for 13 years, and their answer is that if there was no impervious surfaces in Westford, then the water would be pristine, the conditions here would be without any impurity at all, but every square foot of impervious surface that we've built has burdened our water infrastructure all that much more. And so that's the connection, and that's the connection that's made rather universally.
Yeah, I think the one that's outstanding is the issue of if, I've built this state-of-the-art stormwater management system, so why am I still getting charged?
Right.
And I think the answer has been, it's never 100% captured.
Never.
Never
No.
100%. But yeah, we didn't talk about, you know, you have to have a credit policy
Yes.
if we go to the fee. So, you know, we would have to have a way to account for those who are keeping some of their runoff on their property, and there's a bunch of ways to do that. If you come over to my exhibit, I can talk to you about it more.
Yeah. So there has to be some connection, and that's the one that's been universally made, and one that makes sense. You can reduce we would encourage people to take out your gravel, take out your paved driveway and put in a gravel driveway or some other porous to get the rain and melting snow into the ground as quickly as it can from where it falls.
So it's up to you all. If you would like, we can start at the beginning of their stormwater. It's more, you know, high level stormwater 101. If you all are interested, she can start that presentation. It's really up to you all. I just wanted to get to the finances and make sure you understood that part. So, I guess a show of hands, who would like Emily to start at the beginning of Stormwater 101? Right now, yes.
Got another 6 hours?
We
do it?
Well, we
Jody,
have another
We
70.
did do this presentation,
Yeah.
is online.
Yes, it is online too, right? I
We
think
did this
we just
presentation at the
streamlined
zoning
it.
board of appeals last month, and it's at all of our information's at westfordma.gov/stormwater, or just Westford Stormwater. You'll
But
get to
if
our
you would
website.
like to see the presentation, we're happy to start that.
I'm more interested in what you're gonna tell town meeting.
Well,
Well, we don't need to do that
Not
here.
this.
that's pretty much kind of what we
Not that.
started with, but we might flesh out a little
I
at the
think you need some
beginning.
of that stuff we were just talking about to sort of tell them why.
Yep, that sounds good. All right, so
Thank you.
are we,
Thank you,
do you,
guys.
anybody wanna see her presentation, or do you wanna go
Yeah.
online? Huh?
We only had a few slides, I think, that went over the full background.
So how long would you need to show
Emily
those?
can do that in
It's
10
only a
minutes.
couple minutes. I
Okay,
have a
so
couple
why don't
minutes
you
of
pull 'em
stuff
up?
here. This is the previous
Larry.
version of this.
Larry.
Larry,
Hello. I'll call
Yes.
you. I got your email, I'll give you a call.
Okay, thanks.
Check his hearing next time he goes in for
Lost his hearing aid on vacation.
oh,
Oh, did he?
bummer.
What'd you say?
We're on TV,
Oh.
okay.
They're gonna edit it.
Okay, good.
Yeah, there's not, so I don't have oodles that was in this presentation
Well,
about
that's good.
stormwater. I just have a couple, and I think really we can get a lot of that information at Paul's station, going through some of what's in the master plan, but some of the information that we like to present about the stormwater program is just the fact that, really Westford has a vast drainage system. So we talked a lot about program compliance, and that is certainly a big driver behind the increased costs and what the town has been doing since 2003. But also, when we look at these numbers, 60 miles of drain pipes is a lot. Almost 6,000 drainage structures. These all need to be inspected and maintained. 675 outfalls, and we've been actually whittling down the number of outfalls that are considered part of the regulated program, but still those ends of pipes are out there, and most of them need to be investigated, inspected, and
Tested.
tested.
We have to go out in dry weather, see if
Oh,
water
and
is
alpha,
flowing,
yes.
and then take a test, because the assumption is if water's flowing and hasn't rained in 72 hours, something's coming in the ground that shouldn't be. So.
Yeah, and this is an outfall. So the outfall, because we speak this EPA jargon all the time, it's where the drainage system discharges out to the environment. And the thing with stormwater that is different from sanitary sewer is it's really not treated unless it's at a commercial site where they've put in some treatment systems. For the most part, it's been designed over the years to just whisk stormwater off the road surface as quickly as possible and dump it out into the nearest wetland, stream, lake. So there's very little treatment, a lot of sediment, and it carries anything off the roadway surface. The other big nut with the stormwater program is the number of culverts in Westford. So there's 285 culverts that are currently mapped. I mean, it seems like there could be a few more out there, but culverts are subject to a lot of wear and tear. They're easily blocked with beaver activity, particularly in Westford. It seems like they all are full of beavers. And these need regular operation and maintenance and sometimes repair and upsizing because of additional or more intense storms and higher storm volumes and more urbanization in the watershed.
I know some of you here already are aware that there is a stream crossing guideline, so when we replace culverts today, unfortunately, the last 3, we've been able to get the state or the federal government to pay for those replacements. Down on, by Ace Hardware, for example, this summer we're replacing one. It's a 31-inch pipe today, corrugated metal pipe. It's in failure, it needs to be replaced. They're telling us we have to replace it with a 8.5-foot bridge to allow for critters to cross. And so that's all of our culverts that go into failure today. Beaver Brook is another one we're already designing, got the state to pay for that one, but they're not gonna pay for all the culverts around town. And when we go to replace them, they're gonna say, you can't just put a pipe in the ground anymore. You've gotta build a bridge so critters can cross and so that the Blandings turtle can make it from one side to another.
And
Right?
so-
Take notes, take notes.
And so, just tying it back to the stormwater master plan, what's not shown on this slide, when you look at urbanization and development, there is a lot of research about the link between increased impervious cover and degradation of your water quality, so streams, lakes, rivers. And that's in volume 1 of the master plan where we spell that out. And in volume 1, we look at the different watersheds in Westford and what the impacts have been to date. And largely in Westford, you're fortunate to be in a position where you've had good land use management and good engineering controls, and you're trying to preserve your quality of life and water quality. Things look very good in Westford at this point. It's particularly being in Eastern Mass.
Right. Our
not
founders did a very good job. That's why they were mostly farmers and they knew what they were doing. We don't have a lot of flooding in Westford because they've precluded those problems with a good drainage design. But that was 200 years ago. Now it's overwhelmed by the increased impervious surface. And it's buried structures in the ground that have been exposed to salt that we put on the roads. Things are going into failure.
Okay.
And will need to be replaced.
Yeah, so I won't belabor it anymore, but there's lots to think about with stormwater, and we could talk for the rest of the day.
So is that good?
Yeah.
All right, so maybe our presentation should start with this and then get into the rest? Okay, all right, good.
But mostly the financial stuff.
So I think if anybody else has any more questions to ask, then we could stop the live presentation and you can meander around if you want and look at things, up to you. Good? Okay, well, thank you so much for coming, and please go on our website and please stay and look at your property if you're interested.
Jody, for the interested people, though,